Although they think it's fun, I still enjoy bringing them because it's a family affair. I'm asking you that if you thought you had a hard time finding educators before, well, it's not going to get any better. I don't want to leave MPS. I grew up, and every time anyone told me, you're going to MPS? Why? You can go to all these other districts. I always said, I want to do my internships where the students really need me and the families. I love what I do, so please don't force me to walk out on my passion. I had great educators and mentors in my life. Director Bonds, you taught me to fight for public education during my undergrad education at UWM. Director Bias, you always said, stand up for what you believe, and that is why I'm here, to stand up for all, my colleagues, families, and my MPS students. So please stop looking at us as numbers, because that's not what we are. We're human beings, and we want to give back. But if you tear us down, there's nothing that we can give back. So I am please asking you to consider why we're here.
Once again, is there anyone whose name was called earlier who might have just came into the room? Okay, if not, I'm going back to the speaker. The last speaker was Vice President Miller. Is there anyone else on the committee who would like to speak? What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? What is the pleasure of the committee in respect to this item?
Mr. Chair.
President Sane.
I move approval of this item so that we can give the administration the opportunity to meet and confer and to add this amount into the upcoming budget.
Okay. Any additional comments by a board member? If not, Madam Secretary, I was trying to wait till my colleague come back so he can participate. Director Falk, you want to talk?
I just want to, and I'm trying to delay until Director Miller comes back, but the point I would like to make is that I think tonight there is a desire to have more conversations, and let's see what we can do with those conversations. And
using existing internal resources, and be it further resolved that the new strategy include 2 substitute teacher classifications, day-to-day substitutes and regular substitutes, whereby a regular substitute teacher is one who agrees to serve in any school on any day in the school year and works 19 consecutive work days to obtain regular substitute status and receive a higher rate of pay than a day-to-day substitute. And be it further resolved that the administration explore additional opportunities to incentivize a substitute teacher's desire to obtain regular substitute teacher status and serve in hard-to-fill assignments. And be it further resolved that the regular substitute teachers serving in the classroom for which there is no teacher available are eligible for vacancy pay. And be it further resolved that all dispatching of substitute teachers be done by the MPS Office of Human Resources, and that the district directs substitute teacher assignments based on district need rather than substitute teacher choosing or refusing assignments. And be it further resolved that the newly established strategy for substitute teacher recruitment, hiring, and dispatching be brought to the board no later than the January 2018 board cycle. The recommendation is that the board adopt Resolution 1718R-008 by Director Bonds regarding strategies for substitute teacher recruitment, hiring, dispatching, as amended in the attachments to this item.
Thank you, Board Clerk. Since Director Bonds was the author of this resolution, he's passed the gavel to me so he can speak on it.
Thank you, Director Phillip. The intent of this resolution is to give the district control over how it allocates its substitute teachers, and I believe that as employers, we should determine where our subs go and what our needs are. So I ask my colleagues' support on this item. Okay. Any comment, Director Falk?
I would like to ask the makers of the motion, it seems a little out of order in the sense that we have number 7, which deals with the assessment of substitute teachers and a presentation of that. And then we have regarding regarding the substitute committee, I would personally like to hear those presentations first before we pass on number 6. It seems illogical that we would have a presentation on substitutes after this. So I'm asking the maker of the motion, can we delay your motion until after we take care of 7 and 8?
Madam Secretary, I have no objection to that if that doesn't violate any protocol.
Mr. Chair, that does not violate protocol. However, this item is before the committee, so you could delay the action on this item until a date or time certain, including later in this meeting.
If there's no objection, I will ask Director Falk to make a motion to hold this item to later in the committee.
I move to move item 6 to the last item.
Okay, Madam Secretary, please call. Do any colleagues have any comments on that item? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Director Falk's motion.
On Director Falk's motion to delay action on item 6 until the end of this meeting, Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Miller.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Sane.
Aye.
Chair Bonds.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item.
Item 7 is action on a district-wide assessment of substitute teachers. The administration and the Office of Accountability and Efficiency recommend that the board, 1, direct the administration and the Office of Accountability and Efficiency to examine the impact of the following changes. Changes are, 1, changing maximum lifetime sick leave accrual. 2, changing maximum yearly sick leave accrual. 3, incentivizing attendance for all non-administrative school staff. 4, requiring 5 working days notice for miscellaneous leave. And 6, creating a system to monitor advanced posting of absences. And number 2, after directing the administration and the Office of Accountability and Efficiency to examine the impact of those items, also direct that the administration and the Office of Accountability and Efficiency return with its final recommendation no later than the June 2018 board cycle.
Okay, I want to first see if Office of Accountability have any comment. Mr. Chasen.
Chair Bonds, Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. So we have a presentation that we'd like to provide to the board. I'm sure everybody here actually read the 32-page attached report in its entirety, but I hope you'll extend to me the luxury of giving you the key findings through this presentation. So this work was the result of the Resolution 1718 R07 by Director Bonds. And what it asked specifically was to take a look at the disaggregation of data so we could have a better understanding of those inputs that drive how successful our substitute teacher system is. And all of the asks that were present in that resolution are available in that report. And so fundamentally, one of the measures we have to monitor the success of our subsystem is the fill rate. When we look at fiscal year 2017, of the roughly 75,000 recorded absence events that were in our absence management system, only roughly 62,000 were filled. And that's what gives us our 82% fill rate. One of the first questions we asked was, is this purely then a function of us having more absences than we have subs to fill? And so what we did is we plotted the size of the teacher sub pool for every day in fiscal year 2017. Beneath that, we then plotted, which is the orange dots, the total number of recorded teacher absences. And as a reference line, we included the gray line, which you can see is 80% of the sub-pool. And what we found is that between the months of September and June, which is our traditional calendar, a typical median value is that we have 686 subs available in our pool when we only have 429 absence events. What this suggests is that at only 63% of the sub-pool capacity, the fill rate is not exclusively dependent right now on the size of the sub-pool. And if we take a look at that 80% reference line, in the course of a fiscal year, that's one being 17, we only exceeded 80% 16 times in the 190-day calendar. So at this point, it's helpful to understand what is the process by which we have subs execute to fill. And essentially, it is one of self-selection. What happens is when an absence is known and is recorded in our absence management system, it becomes available through a portal through which substitutes can then self-select that opportunity. And that absence remains available for selection by a sub up and until about an hour before school closes. Now, I highlight that here because, as we're going to see in a little bit, the fill rate is very much dependent upon this window. So we did a good review of the literature and peer-reviewed research to determine, in a self-selection model, what are those inputs that help us determine how we're going to get a fill rate. And we looked at the data that is available to subs at the time that they can select or not select to take a particular subbing opportunity. And we then explored which of these is associated with a low fill rate. And so the first grouping that we looked at was the school type. And we determined that in this chart, you can see there are a couple of things that, that stand out. That is, high schools and elementary and secondary combined have a relatively stable and comparatively high fill rate. What you also see is that the elementary schools and at the middle schools, they have a lower fill rate. And between the periods of 2015 to 2017 fiscal years, the elementary schools and middle schools experienced a significant decline. We then took a look at the opportunity for subs to make a self-selection based on the day of the week on which that opportunity would be available. And here, too, this chart shows us two things. Basically, perhaps predictably, Wednesday is associated with the highest fill rate, and Mondays and Fridays are associated with the lowest fill rates. In all instances, between 2015 and 2017, we've seen a decline in those fill rates. Now, I alluded earlier to the fact that I highlighted that window in which a sub can self-select for an opportunity. And when we conducted our literature review, we found an interesting study by an economist who had looked at the self-selection behavior of substitutes. And he found that there was a significant correlation between the amount of time before which an absence is available for selection and the time when it occurs. So in the example of this slide here, if we were to compare the fill rate of an absence in which there was 5 days of advance notice versus an absence event where there was only 1 day of advance notice, what would that look like? And we discovered that the effects are rather significant. When we compare the fill rates within the past 3 fiscal years, 2015 to 2017, and we compare that to the days of advance notice, we see that subs fill at extremely high rates. When there are 5 days of notice, it's roughly 95%. What we also see is that there is a rather steep decline as we approach 0 days of advance notice, to the tune of, in aggregate over these 3 years and across the district, just above a 40% fill rate with zero lead time on the absence. We then wanted to explore whether or not these factors, having considered, then interact with each other. And the reason we do this is important because as we look at the opportunity to improve these fill rates, if we can manipulate more than just one single factor because of how they interact, it provides us a better opportunity on the outcome. And so we looked at how these factors interrelate with each other. And the first interaction we explored was that of the number of calendar days of advance notice with the day of the week. And what you see again is that about 5 days and on, subs fill at a very high rate, approaching 95%. Now, each day of the week suffers as we move from that advance notice from 5 days to 0. Some days of the week are more sensitive to this decline. So for example, Fridays with 0 days of notice have roughly a 27% fill rate compared to the Wednesday, which is in excess of 50%. I hope that you notice there's a unique outlier on that 3-day notice. You'll notice that blue dot, which represents a Monday, is actually lower with 3 days of notice than it is with only 2. And what we found is interesting, and what you'll see on an additional slide, is that the 3 days of notice represents an absence whose opportunity to fulfill is put on a Friday for the subsequent Monday. And it's an interesting insight into the self-selection behavior of our subs that that one particular opportunity is overlooked. So the next interaction we looked at was the number of calendar days versus the school type. And so again, regardless of school type, with 5 days of notice, our subs fill at almost 95%. As we approach the 0 days of advance notice, we again see a similar decline. Some school types are more sensitive to this. Elementary and middle will fill at only a rate of about 30% with 0 days notice, compared to elementary, secondary, and high, which will fill at about 60%. You might be able to anticipate sort of where this is going. And so when we look at all 3 factors combined at once, we can see the truly compounding effect of these factors on the fill rate. And what you see is basically the perfect storm of scenarios that leads to such a low fill rate. So for example, if on a Friday, there's a middle school that puts on an absence for the same day, that is associated with only a 17% fill rate. Elementary schools are only just a hair better with a 20% fill rate. And what this really demonstrates is the sensitivity of the self-selection process to the amount of lead time that is available. Looking at these comparisons, 2 days of lead time more than doubles your associated fill rate. So we took a look then also at the top 4 appearing absence events in our absence management system. And what we would like to see, based on the analysis thus far, is that as much lead time in advance of an absence that it be posted. Unfortunately, what we see is that there's a strong uptick the day before. And this is a speculation, but it is possible that because staff do not realize the sensitivity of the advanced lead time on the chance to fill, that they sit in a box and then the day before the absence needs to be filled, it gets put onto the system. And this would be something we would look to correct going forward. So what are these absence events? When we take a look at the highest occurring ones, we see that position vacancy represents nearly 40% of those that occur in the recorded absence management system. Now, this position vacancy is a budgeted teacher position that has not been staffed. Now, the impact of this, we explored. And again, looking at the median rates of these, the subpool size and the number of vacancies that meet this condition, even before a teacher calls in sick, we have roughly 25% of our available subpool allocated just to these position vacancies. Now, from a self-selection process, these vacancies are preferentially selected because they have the attraction of increased pay with a long-term assignment. So up till now, we've considered sort of the demand side, and now we're going to look at the supply side. And so we looked at the teacher absence distribution over the past 3 fiscal years, and I'll explain what this chart means. That first quartile means that 25% of our teacher staff take, in 2015, less than 3.2 days of sick. The median value of 5.9 means that 50% of our teachers took less than this amount in 2015, and 50% took more. The third quartile represents the point at which 25% of our teacher staff took more than 10 days of sick. When we compared these rates to examine if there was a trend, what we see is that there's nearly a half-day instruction of increase across the entire distribution. And so where in the first quartile it was at 3.2, it's now near 4. The median value has also shifted accordingly to 6.5 days. And we have 25% of our teachers that take in excess of almost 11 days of sick. Because the research suggests that higher usage of sick leave has been associated with the presence of large banks of sick leave and a high annual allotment of sick time, it's important that we place this uptick into a context. And so what we can see here is the policy decisions that have occurred over this interval. So for a teacher that was hired before July 2013, the maximum amount of sick leave that they could accrue in a year was 100 hours. The max that they could accrue over their lifetime was 1,160 hours. There was the incentive not to use this balance prior to July 2013 with the eligibility for board subsidized retiree health if 90% of that max was met. After July 2013, teachers continue to accrue a maximum annual amount of 100 hours, and they can continue to accrue a maximum lifetime amount of 1,160 hours with no incentive in place to not use. So I wanted to show this slide, not as a proposal, but to set a realistic expectation of incentivizing attendance. We spend roughly $9 million per year on substitute teachers. That was the amount in FY17. And if we took a look at shifting some of those costs in savings that we would not pay to a sub, but perhaps pay as a monetary incentive to staff to have excellent attendance, we see the following scenarios here. And what we see is, I think, somewhat interesting. So the least favorable scenario represents the fact that we have roughly 100 teachers annually who show up all day, every day, and don't take any sick. And we would, under an incentive model, pay them for their excellent attendance. So we're already in the hole in terms of savings. And as we go forward, we look at how do we bend the use of sick on those margins of the staff that take more than 7 days and those that take more than 11. And the fact is, I don't believe it would be difficult to extrinsically motivate that staff through a monetary incentive to decrease their sick usage. And so these are the recommendations that we have based on these findings. To examine changing the maximum lifetime sick accrual, to examine changing the maximum yearly sick accrual, to examine incentivizing attendance for all non-administrative school staff. The theory of action behind this would be that since schools have been cut significantly over time, and looking at it as a holistic system, that incentivizing the attendance of all school support staff is more likely to improve the attendance of everyone there, especially those that support the classroom teachers, like paras and safeties and secretaries. And given the sensitivity that we have seen in fill rates to the amount of lead time, we would require 5 working days of notice for the use of miscellaneous leave. And finally, we recommend creating a system to monitor the advanced posting of these absences, again reflecting the sensitivity that they have to the amount of lead time. With that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, once again, if there's no objection from my colleagues, I want to go to the speaker slips. I have 4 speaker slips. Item 7, John Harvey. Actually, I got 3 because I got 2 from John Harvey, followed by Amy, and followed by Kathy Geiger. Once you come up, please state your name and spell your last name for the public record.
Yes, my name is John Harvey, and I'm a substitute teacher here at MPS. Before being
Mr. Harvey, just spell your name for the public.
Yes.
Your last name for the public record.
My last name is spelled Harvie. And some of this incentive system for teachers is not directly related to being a substitute teacher, but other aspects of what you said are. And I'd like to address those aspects, like filling schools above 82% or 80. That percentage of assignments that go unfilled are assignments that substitute teachers have difficulty filling with their level of competency. We need to invest in substitute teachers in order to take those positions. I put together a 27-page proposal or document that stressed what's wrong with the system right now. And part of what you said is absolutely true. No matter how many substitute teachers you hire, those positions don't get filled. Those long-term positions, which our task force did not discuss adequately, but also the difficult-to-fill schools. Those are the 15% of the schools that do not get substitute teachers. To fill those substitute teachers positions in those schools, you need competent substitute teachers. To be a competent substitute teacher, you have to be dedicated to your job and your profession, and it's difficult to do that without health insurance. There are ways to train and develop and support substitute teachers so that they can get to fill those positions. And I outlined that in the document that I sent the entire board. I hope the entire board received it and read it, because part of what I am shocked and appalled at is that I don't know, sir, if you have ever met a substitute teacher, seen what they do, but many times they leave.
Can you direct it to me?
They leave a school after hours because they cannot handle it. I've been to Webster at the end of the school year last year, and I had somebody who was there, a substitute teacher for years, but couldn't handle more than an hour there. The way to...
Yeah, go ahead, John. Next speaker, Amy. No, the light. Amy, I got to give all the speaker a chance to talk to. Amy, it's your turn. Thank you, Mr. Harvey.
I'm up on the next 2 slots.
Okay. Amy, followed by Kathy Geiger and Evan Stevens.
ZIALKO. Any recommendation to make cuts to sick hours is indefensible. Instead, this is a shameful recommendation and discriminates against every employee who is suffering from a chronic health condition, many of which who you heard from tonight. Education is work done largely by women. This recommendation is discriminatory against every woman who wants to be both an educator and a mother. And this recommendation would discriminate against educators who are responsible for the care of their aging and dying parents. This board must not allow cuts to sick hours. And I just want to say that in my 26 years in this district, I have never been a substitute teacher. But I have seen what substitute teachers have done in all of the schools that I have worked in. They are integral to our schools. We cannot run the district without them. And this board must provide health care to substitute teachers in this district.
Kathy Geiger, followed by Evan Stevens. Kathy, spell your last name for the public record.
G-E-R.
And once again, when the light come on, you have to stop because I got to give other people time to speak too. Go ahead, Kathy.
G-E-I-G-E-R. Had this been in the correct order, you would have already had a copy of some of the things that are wrong with your current system of ESOP. A few cautions when reading this study. I already warned you about the validity of the data coming from a broken ESOP. So these results must all be taken with a grain of salt. Also note, and by the way, I did read the 32 pages, so I'm going to point out some things on certain pages. Also note that all types of absences were included. All of the absences for your professional development were included in the data. This is very misleading. It skews the results. Your mandated PD is causing more demand for substitutes than we already have a shortage. Most of my requests to sub are from teachers that come in advance for an upcoming PD. Note on page 16 of your report that 40% of the absences do not match up, which means that 40% of the absences are really from teacher vacancies, unfilled positions. To me, this would point to an inefficiency in human resources hiring process. We know also from page 3 of your study that there is a decrease in the supply of teachers and subs nationwide. Some causality factors noted on page 3 warrant further investigation and internal research. Number 1, quote, the quality of the geographical location of a school. This is why you don't get subs. Number 2, the role of stress, burnout, and depressive symptoms cannot be overlooked in the role of teacher absenteeism. Please listen to your own study. On page 6, it says strategies to increase the subpool have included increasing pay, offering benefits or bonuses, and hiring permanent subs. On the last page of your report, it refers to the fact that new hirees after July 13th no longer have the incentive of accruing sick time to receive retiree health benefit. Your own report says that that should be reconsidered. Please read your report.
Thank you, Ms. Geiger. Evan Stevens. Please state your name and spell your last name for the public record.
My name is Evans L. Stevens, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-S. I began my career in MPS in 1970. I retired in 2004. They officially gave me 33.9 years. I went out in June, came back in February 2005. And I've been on the grind ever since then. There are some things that are wrong with the system that we do. And one of the things that Blasingame said, there's nothing that's so unequal as is the unequal treatment of the unequal. Each and every day, substitutes carry the weight of this district. If you don't believe it, fire all the subs. See what happened to the district. Fire all the subs and see how long this district will survive. I love what I do. I love what I do. This is why I still do it. When you don't give substitutes any benefits, you don't give them that much pay, what is the incentive to come to work every day? And then because of the kind of things that you have put in place in terms of suspension and other things, the hoops and circles you have to go through, a chair may get thrown at you. You get cursed out every day. You're abused every day. So why do I want to just go to any school that I know that these things go on? This is why it's done selectively, so that they can go in and do what they enjoy doing, and that is teaching and not being abused. I wonder when was the last time that anybody on the board spent 2 days in a classroom? I wonder when was the last time that you even went to a school and spent a whole day there and not do picture taking. I'm talking about getting in the grind and teaching. What you need to do is come from the Eiffel Tower and go into the grind, get into the trenches like we do. I'm going to keep on doing what I do because I'm good at what I do. And I love what I do. But you need to make sure that the people that's working hard for you are taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Superintendent Driver, did the administration have any comments on this item? Did you have any comments on this item? Okay, any additional comments? Okay, do Office of Accountability have any additional comments on this item? Do my colleagues have any comments on this item? Director Falk.
Thank you. I think all of you understand that I always have a comment on everything. My question to you is as a teacher going back as long as Mr. Evans was a teacher, we used to have incentive days. And what you presented tonight made actually a strong case for incentive days and explaining how that worked. Teachers, if they only were absent a couple days in a semester, got to have an incentive day where they took off. What they would have to do was, in advance, clear that particular day with their principal. Now, there are two things that you're bringing forward, which it makes an argument where incentive days probably did work. One was, I believe the teachers who utilized incentive days were actually absent less than if they didn't have the incentive days. That's the first thing. And secondly, they scheduled it far enough in advance that there was allocation of a substitute teacher. So I was just wondering if that was my perception. I wondered if you looked at that or whether the data is really kind of old in terms of being able to look at that stuff.
Mr. Chasen, would you like to respond?
Chair Bonds, Director Falk, Matt Chasen, OAE. So certainly that is an option that could be explored, and certainly there is data that suggests that there may be the opportunity to incentivize improved attendance using that as a tool. I'm reticent to suggest that that's going to solve a lot of absenteeism through the usage of sick because of the amount of the distribution, which is in excess of 7 days. I can't believe that we can extrinsically motivate someone with an additional incentive days to take 6 fewer days of sick to gain 1 more day outside of the classroom. So it's certainly worth exploring, but I think there should be a realistic expectation on the ability to bend the curve of absenteeism by staff using that as a tool.
Okay, any additional comments by Director Voss?
Thank you, Chair Bonds. I guess my question is for OAE. Had you considered a buyback option for sick time so that there's no penalty for those that do use for maternity leave or long-term, but then there's also the incentive that speaks to some of the reward that's possible depending on how many days and what you're talking about, rather than decreasing the sick time, offering a buyback that might get us more higher attendance and continuity, I guess, for our kids.
Mr. Chasen, would you like to respond?
Chair Bonds, Director Voss, Matt Chasen, OAE. That would be another option that is absolutely worth exploring. We have not done any sensitivity based on the numbers we have in front of us to see what type of a return we might see, but we'd be happy to explore that as an option.
Okay. Additional comments by committee members. Vice President Miller.
Yeah, Chair Bonds, I wanted to ask OAE, did you take a look at the 32-page article that Mr. Harvey presented? Or 27-page, I'm sorry, excuse me, ours was 32. Did you get a chance to look at it? Because I have not.
Mr. Chasen.
Chair Bonds, Vice President Millard, no, I'm sorry, we did not see that document. We'd be happy to review it. And since we'll be bringing back final recommendations in June, certainly the input of that would likely be reflected in that being brought forward.
Vice President Miller.
So I would suggest that for that presentation in June, that you have some discussion with Mr. Harvey and some other, that he bring with him 2 or 3 other, you know, you don't want a whole room full. Bring with him some other people to have some discussion about your report and his report, and help us in this analysis, because I'm not ready to make a recommendation on all of this. This is, you know, first of all, I read your document. I'm sorry, and I'm pretty good at this, but it was very helpful to have you present it. I have a much better understanding. I appreciate it. But I would like to see if you, and I know you guys are not adverse to that at all. You guys meet and confer with everybody. So I would ask that you do that before your recommendation, you know, before you come back to us in June.
Okay, additional comments by committee members?
Here.
Director Baez.
Yes, Director Bonds. I like the report, and I like what you did with the analysis. I think that what Director Miller has said is very important, that we look at all these input means and mechanisms. I'm sort of like concerned about, and I'm not a voting member of this committee, but I would urge other board members to consider this, that I don't think that we are really ready to make sort of like OAE go and look at particular issues like limiting, you know, sick leave and what have you. We may be more ready at the possibility of ongoing discussions that will lead to a coming back of OEA in June, okay? After consideration and after listening to all the other input of people. Because I don't think that even exploring the idea of limiting sick leave when we are right now considering incentives that are going to help keep people here as opposed to push people out is something that we need to even think about right now, okay? So I would just urge committee members to think about that possibility. Yes, continue to explore, continue to talk to people, bring and look at that other analysis that Mr. Harvey has presented and others have commented on, and then come back to us in June. So I would urge the committee to think about it. Okay?
Additional comments by committee member. What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? It's action.
So it's just, well, I move that we accept the report.
I think this is this is
it's
an
a
action
report with
item.
possible
Item 7
action.
is action. No, it's not. I got the right here. It's an action item.
Yeah, there's two action items on here.
Yeah. So, once again, item 7 is action on the district-wide assessment of substitute teachers. So this is an action item. What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? What is the respect of the committee with respect to this item?
Mr. Chair Bonds?
We have,
Let's take a
what is
5-minute
the-
recess.
well, yeah,
It
what
seems like
is the
there's some
action?
clarification.
We don't know.
Madam Secretary, please note to take a 5-minute recess. Please note the time that we got time clarification. Larry, Larry, this is an action
You're
item.
right, it does say, I was looking,
Yeah.
I had already jumped ahead to this past one, so
Oh, it's
that's why I
action.
had it wrong.
And you were sweet to offer your hand. I understand or do. Pardon my asking what's new. Of course you couldn't know. I haven't changed changed, I still love you so. What's new? Probably I'm boring you, but seeing you is grand, and you is sweet to offer your hand. I understand, I do. Pardon my asking what's new. Of course you couldn't know. I haven't changed, I still love you so. Day in, day out, same old hoodoo follows me about. The same old pounding in my heart whenever I think of you. And darling, I think of you day in and day out, day out, day in. I needn't tell you how my days begin. When I awaken with a tingle. One possibility in view, that possibility of maybe seeing you. Come rain, come shine, I meet you and to me that day is fine. Then I kiss your lips and the pounding becomes the ocean's roar, 1,000 drums. Can you see its love? Can there be any doubt when there it is day in, day out? Come on and shine. I meet you and to me that day is fine. Then I kiss your lips and the pounding becomes the ocean's roar, 1,000,000 drums. Can you see its love? Can there be any doubt when there it is day in, day out? When there it is day in, day out. You're clear out of this world when I'm looking at you. I hear out of this world the music that no mortal ever knew. You're right out of a book, the fairy tale I read when I was so high. No, I'm a knight out of a book, was more enchanted by a Lorelei than after waiting so long for the right time, after reaching so long for a star, all at once from the long and lonely nighttime, and despite time, here you are. I'd cry out of this world if you said we were through. So let me fly out of this world and spend the next eternity or two with you. After waiting so long for the right time, after reaching so long for a star, all at once from a long and lonely nighttime, and despite time, here you are. I'd cry out of this world if you said we were through. So let me fly out of this world and spend the next eternity or two with you. Joey, 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 Joe. You've been too long in one town, and it's time to go, time to go. Joey, 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 travel on. You've been too long in one place, and the harvest time's come and gone. That's what the wind sings to me when the bunk I've been bunking in gets to feel a new soft and cozy. When the grub they've been cooking me gets to tasting too good.